Tell me what you assess as some of the biggest stories of the year and what might be big political stories looking ahead to the next year.
Yeah, well, if you just take a glance back, Mark, I mean, the obvious, the giant elephant in the room is January 20th, when everything changed dramatically when a new president was inaugurated, not just any new president. And then, of course, after that, the giant T word, Mark, the tariff issue, is certainly, it continues to loom large. People still don't know exactly what the impacts of those are going to be. And then I'd have to say, and you could pick a whole host of other things. I want to come back to the Middle East here a little bit, but certainly what happened with Israel and Gaza, very big deal. Along with that, of course, the associated bombing of the Iran nuclear facilities, a big deal. And now we close the year out. And, just from a purely political point of view, it's the A word, it's affordability, which, everybody in Washington is very nervous about on both sides, particularly the GOP heading into a midterm election that's going to be pivotal. And we'll talk more about that in a moment too here, in just 10 months.
You know, I would add to what you just said, the dismantling of government. I mean, I think the Doge move, which was illegal from everything I was able to figure, but maybe you can explain the questionable legality, how this band of laptop wearing billionaire boys club, tech club wannabes. Now, these are all like the proteges of Musk and his, how they can move into government and dismantle as much as they did. I mean, firing hundreds of thousands of federal employees, closing down entire arms and institutions in government from USAID to basically defanging EPA. That strikes me as a pretty big deal as well.
Oh, it absolutely is, Mark. The thing about that that's interesting is that many of those steps, not all of them by any stretch, but many of them have been quietly walked back, as you know, either because courts said you have to walk them back or because there was such blowback, sometimes from the GOP itself, especially GOP leadership in the Senate, who said, look, come on, and so much of this, if you track it, you notice you don't hear anything about Doge anymore. I mean, zero, right? It is literally off the political radar screen for both parties because it was a big splash, especially when Elon was walking around for his 100 days. But since then, it has really quieted down. And again, much of that dismantling has been somewhat walked back. And of course, the interesting part of it, Mark, is going to be to see what happens after the midterms and especially after 2028, when it's potentially, if the legality is upheld, that an executive branch can simply dismantle things or dismiss people, well, then, of course, the reverse is true as well. A Democratic president in 2028 could tear most of the tearing down apart.
Yeah, interesting. And that's all people in the Democratic Party, I think about in relation to government is that, well, maybe we can, put the pieces back together. I'd suggest that the purge, though, is still something that is real. You know what I mean? And the loyalty tests are still real. Gary, I think that
Oh, yeah.
maybe they've walked some of it back, but it feels like Washington's a different place than it was.
Oh, no doubt, Mark. I mean, I'm talking about the large scale kind of, dismantling pieces. You just talk, you don't even hear Trump talk about that anymore, interestingly, let alone other people in the Republican Party. Yeah, I do have kind of three biggies for 2026 whenever you want me to sort of.
Yeah, no, please, let's look ahead, and then I'll double back to some of this other stuff.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, the biggest single story, and of course, all of this, the caveat to all of this, Mark, is who knows what happens. What do I mean by that? I mean, a terrorist event, something untoward that's going to happen either in the Middle East or with Russia, Ukraine. Those are the two big foreign policy things I'm going to set out there. We're supposed to be moving into phase 2 of the Israel-Gaza peace accord. Let's see if that happens. There's an awful lot of nervousness in Washington about whether that's going to continue to hold and what kind of fruit it's going to bear. And of course, the giant elephant in foreign policy in the room is there actually going to be some sort of a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine? We heard over the weekend from the president of Finland saying, well, we're down to the last 5% in terms of negotiations. Well, but of course, he said, as often happens in negotiations, it's the toughest 5%. So let's see, that would be, those two things could be the giant caveats to what I'm going to share now. But number one has to be the midterms. I mean, in just a little over 10 months, Trump's either going to be effectively shut down if the Democrats take one or both of the chambers of Congress back, or he's going to continue on for the last half of his final term. I mean, and it's hard to overstate, Mark, the political importance of this midterm election for those reasons. I mean, people all know it. Everybody in the country gets this almost intuitively, but the midterms, it's just difficult to overstate how big that is. So I would say that's the biggie. And then also why these midterms are important, Mark, of course, is because they lay a foundation for the next presidential race just 3 years out. And, either a Democratic, nominee is going to be staring at the prospect of a Republican Congress in 2028, or they're going to be saying, look, it's time for us to take the whole shebang back. It's going to be marching orders, in other words, for the next big presidential race as well. So there's number one. If you want to comment on that, I'm certainly open to it.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I wonder if the Venezuela moves are going to create anything. You made me think of it when you said, you talked about Ukraine, you talked about the Middle East, you talked about some of these things, and I'm thinking, and the other big foreign policy thing, but you can tell me if it's just posturing, if it's just saber rattling, or if he's really going to begin some kind of a serious military aggression toward Venezuela beyond what we've already seen.
Yeah. Well, of course, right now we're in the midst of them sequestering these oil tankers that they say, are flying illegitimate national flags, all kinds of things. And so the only way I think Venezuela becomes a true liability for Trump is if there's a direct military conflict, especially, Mark, if that resulted in any U.S. casualties, right?
Yeah.
So far, there hasn't been anything from the Venezuelan government about, hey, you know what, you fly too close, you sail too close, we're starting to shoot something. That has not happened at all, right? So far, it's been ramp up the pressure on the regime and the government in Venezuela, and see if you can get the current occupant of the presidency there to basically exit stage left. And that's the strategy. We'll see if it works.
It's just interesting, too, this so well, that presidents oftentimes, particularly toward the end of their administration, begin foreign policy moves of one sort or another because they don't really need Congress to do anything on that. They can make those moves unilaterally. Now, as it turns out, Trump has kind of redefined everything. He doesn't need Congress on anything, but I associate the kind of moves he's making with the end of a presidency, and here we are only in year one.
Well, that should say something really to those that still harbor the tiniest of aspirations that there's going to be another version of Trump that happens in 2028 and beyond. Even for example, in some of the larger GOP political gatherings recently, there's really no serious talk about that. So, to say that Trump is a lame duck, he wouldn't want to hear that, but he certainly is coming up to the last 3 years of his presidency. And in 10 months, that process of lame duckness may be seriously accelerated, which takes me into number two, Mark, and that is redistricting. I mean, it is, again, difficult to overstate how impactful all these various independent state actions, when they get amalgamated here, and it's going to happen in about 6 months, when Texas and California and Florida and all the rest of the red and blue states, where they finally end up, whether they've given seats that lean towards a particular party or the other, this is going to have ripple effects not only in 26 and 28, but beyond. And along with that is going to be the massive shoe waiting to drop end of spring, beginning of the summer. We've talked about this, the Supreme Court decision on the Voting Rights Act, and whether they will basically compel states to redraw as many as several dozen districts that most observers believe could, if that happens, lean more Republican. And that would have massive effects on, the constitution of Congress, potentially for the next decade and potentially even beyond.
There's a lot of power that rests with the Supreme Court, it would seem, in this year ahead as well. And, as you look at these and as you prioritize these and as you break out these different issues that will likely become so relevant to American life and political life, wow, Supreme Court is right at the center of the action.
Yeah. And, people will say, but Gary, what about this issue, this issue, this issue? The reason I'm bringing up things like midterm elections and redistricting is because they affect all issues, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. They'll affect all kinds of other things, investigations, potential new impeachment calls. I mean, there's just so many things that these will impact everything. And the last one I'm going to say is governor's races. Okay. High profile one in California to replace Governor Newsom, but in New York, Kathy Hochul. Now, Elise Stefanik, she dropped out. Let's see if the Republicans put up. There was thought that Stefanik could actually give Hochul a run for her money in New York, but there'll be Vivek Ramaswamy in a very pivotal key state in Ohio, and there's going to be others. Why are governors' races so important? Because, well, three quick reasons, Mark. One is, as you know, state capitals have been the epicenter of resistance to Trump. I mean, most notably in California, but also in Chicago, New York, etc. So that's one reason. A second one is that governors are going to be leading the tops of their tickets. So in all these states where there's going to be redrawn districts, a lot of power filters down from, are people going to be energized to turn out for their governor's race? That affects congressional turnout, etc. And the last one is 2028. Because make no mistake about it, just look at the Democratic field right now, even the Republican field for the most part. One of the trends in recent decades, as you know, Mark, has been more and more attention paid to governors in their bids for the White House than senators. Now, certainly there were some exceptions to that, but really more and more people, especially when it comes to 28, are looking at Democratic governors as the primary challengers.
Yeah, that's such an important part of American life and of life politically. And it's funny, we overlook it oftentimes because we're looking at top of ticket stuff, or we might get distracted. I haven't really talked to you since President Trump went on television with that pep rally or whatever the hell he was doing there for 18 minutes. Play a little bit for Gary, and then I just want to get your general thoughts, because before we start, I just want to say I used to think you're Trump, charismatic. I mean, I know I've been criticized on the show for talking about him as a generational political figure, which I think he is. And I think I'm not saying it's generationally good political figure. I'm just saying, in terms of a transformative figure, I think it's undeniable. But I think part of this is a charisma dynamic that seems to be completely lost now, and I didn't see any of it in his remarks. But I'm more curious about your thoughts. So play a little bit for Gary, and then we'll get his thoughts.
Very importantly, there are more people working today than at any time in American history, and 100% of all jobs created since I took office have been in the private sector. Think of that. 100% of all jobs have been in the private sector rather than government, which is the only way to make a country powerful and great. This historic trend will continue. Already, I've secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment into the United States, which means jobs, wage increases, growth, factory openings, and far greater national security. Much of this success has been accomplished by tariffs. My favorite word, tariffs, which for many decades have been used successfully by other countries against us, but not anymore. Companies know that if they build in America, there are no tariffs, and that's why they're coming home to the USA in record numbers. They're building factories and plants at levels we haven't seen, AI, automobiles. We're doing what nobody thought was even possible, not even remotely possible. There has never, frankly, been anything like it.
Okay.
1 year.
So that's the never been anything like it thing is sort of his default position on everything. But I wanted to play you a part that wasn't, easy, like bust on Trump, which is like the 600% reduction in pharmaceuticals, et cetera, which is just obviously invented. I do think the 18 trillions, I guess, falls in the same category. It's pretty invented as a number. But give me some thoughts on that. And it was viewed sort of as a fumble on his part, wasn't it?
Well, I think the main thing, my takeaway from it, Mark, was there was almost nothing new in it, with the exception of the $1,776 bonus to all U.S. military members, And other than that, it was really a recitation, in Trump's view, of course, of all his successes in the first year of his presidency. You step back from it, and really what I saw it as, Mark, is a campaign speech. Many people are viewing it this way. Basically a kickoff for the midterm elections is the way I viewed it. It had it had all the Trump elements, all the exaggerations, all the everything. I saw it more than anything. Did he really convince anybody? Did he move the needle in terms of changing minds? No, I don't think anybody believes that. I saw it as rallying the base. I saw it as getting the troops in order, getting people ready to charge out the gate come the first week of January. Because again, we're talking 10 months. That is a very short window to orchestrate what effectively is going to be a national campaign by both parties to try to either advance the Trump mission or absolutely capsize it.
Is there a way that the GOP candidates can advance their own mission without having to embrace the Trump mission? Because I think, and I was surprised, he parades these tariffs around like it's some victory lap he's taking over how great they're doing, when the reality is Americans, I think, increasingly associate them with higher prices and with the brutal realities of tariffs, which are not favorable to consumers.
Yeah, I think you're going to see, unlike what happens typically in a presidential election, where there is a national message crafted. Now, Democrats are working on that more than Republicans are. I think many Republicans, particularly in swing districts, are going to be focused far more on individual issues relevant to their states and their districts. They're not going to be running on a Trump/MAGA platform. As you know, most of the time in a presidential race, you're pretty obligated to some degree, right? To kind of line up behind your presidential candidate, like it or not, right? And that was part of the Democrats' concerns last year. Is they're like, well, who do we line up behind and when and how, right? And that was part of their frustration. But they are really working to craft a more unified message right now. I think Republicans are like, look, when I'm out stumping in my district for things that I think are popular in my district, in my state, yeah, I'll get behind Trump. But where they're not, you're starting to see, and you're hearing a lot more of this in the national media, so-called cracks in MAGA, right? That you're seeing people diverge, and most notably, I mean, high profile, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, even Stefanik, as she's stepping out of Congress here at the end of this term, are making no bones about it. Here's the big challenge, I think, Mark. In the Democratic Party, there's several dozen sitting Democratic members that are being challenged by progressives. That's a problem. That for just in terms of sheer raw numbers, right? Democrats in Washington, the DNC, are saying, look, we need to retake the House. Let's everybody take a chill pill here. But that's not really happening with Mamdani's success. On the Republican side, likewise, there's people saying, look, I don't care if I get primaried. I got to survive in this purplish district, and I can't veer hard right just to try to make that happen, to get behind the president.
Well, this is kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about Trump and his group that he's assembled in Washington. They really are the elite of the elite. I mean, Witkoff, who's handling things, is his golfing buddy. He's a billionaire real estate guy. You can go Bessent, same story. These are all, the moneyed aristocracy now runs America. And you could say, well, the money aristocracy always ran America. It's an oligarch. I get it. But I'm just saying now they're really on display. I mean, the Klieg lights are getting hot. And I guess what I'm getting at with regard to what you're talking about in Democrats is, on both sides, I think one can reasonably say, hey, the system isn't serving me. It's a bunch of elites on the Democrat side in terms of mainstream institutional Democrats, and the same is true with these guys who are running Washington now on the GOP side. And so it opens the door to what you're talking about, which is left of center, to be polite. I mean, real progressives on the left-wing side, all of a sudden saying, hey, these people aren't working for you. We know what you want. It's a populist message. And the same is true maybe on the GOP side, although I think they've seen that sort of flame out with the last populist message.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something there, Mark. The energy in the Democratic Party is not, residing in the DNC, in the congressional leadership. I mean, Schumer, he's all but out the door. However it happens, whenever it happens, there's no gravitas left there. Hakeem Jeffries just seems to sometimes he seems on message and he's rallying his troops. Other times his own people are kind of scratching their heads. So I think really it's the progressive activists and to some degree outsiders, as you know, some of the flames stoked by AOC and Bernie. I mean, that's really the energy inside the Democratic Party. And people in the Republican Party are nervous because the thing about it is, apart from Trump, who else is the standard bearer that people can get behind? They're nervous to do that. Nobody wants to really take him on directly, obviously, and it's sort of that, Trump brought in some of his chief critics, Rubio and others, right inside the fold. So there's some rumors now that Ted Cruz is starting to take a serious look at 2028. He was a big anti-Trump voice in the past. Will he be in the future? We'll see.
Yeah, very really interesting. I'm way out of time with you, but I have to shoehorn in one quick question about Greenland. What the hell is happening? Trump's making noise like he wants Greenland again.
Oh boy. Some of these things just recycle. We haven't heard about Alcatraz either, Mark. Maybe that'll come up on New Year's Eve. I don't know. I mean, is there anything serious? He started upsetting, of course, our Nordic friends talking about Greenland again. Is there anything really to that? I think most people say no, so these things just seem to have a life of their own. They just sort of pop up like whack-a-mole every once in a while. And you're just like, what's precipitating this, right? Is there anything we should know new about Greenland? No, so it's sort of like in a moment of boredom or whatever. Let's throw the Greenland card back down on the table. I don't have any explanation for it. I don't really think there is one.
I mean, here's one. He just wants something, and it kind of goes on what you're saying. He wants something to throw into the news cycle that's not Epstein or not economy. It's a distraction, you know what I mean? But that's about the best I can do, because I can't understand anything reasonable about mentioning Greenland and trying to, it's not a political winner. Nobody's talking about it. I don't understand why, he's fixated on it.
Yeah,
But,
suffice it to say, Mark, nobody running for Congress in Iowa is going to be bringing up Greenland. I'll guarantee that.
Exactly. Hey, listen, love all your contributions all year. You're so wonderful to have come over here to begin with. And I literally look forward to these conversations through the weekend. And you're so sharp. You're so great at also talking me off the ledge as I panic. So I hope that the year ahead has many more of these conversations, Gary. And I wish you a Merry, Merry Christmas. And I look forward to the next year as well.
Likewise, Mark. And I simply want to say kudos to you, man. You've really built this show. And I know you've had milestones on that in your likes and clicks and YouTube and all that stuff. Congrats to you. I'm glad your listenership has not only stayed around, but growing. And it's always a pleasure, buddy. We'll look forward to talking to you in 26.
Awesome. Gary Dietrich, everybody. Right on. Right on. By the way, Gary is sponsored by Bill Campbell at Remax Gold. If you're relocating into or from Northern California, a lot of Northern California listeners and viewers, you want a highly respected real estate professional, Bill Campbell is that guy. Remax Gold is where you can find Bill Campbell. Call or text him, 530-448-7474, 530-448-7474. Bill Campbell, Remax Gold. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.